presentation. So I was going through the questions, and it was nice to see that lot of questions were asked on these topics. What we are going to discuss now. So, this topic is not new to doctors, not new to physicians, not new to healers. As long back as 300 BC, we have a statement recorded in history by Alexandrian physician Hippocrates that medicines are nothing in themselves. But are the very hands of God if employed with reason and prudence. We are doing the same thing right now in the modern system of medicine by devising methods to rationalize therapy. And this is what WHO says. Patients receive medications appropriate to the clinical needs in doses that meet their own individual requirements for an adequate period of time and the lowest cost to them and the community. This is rational use of drugs. Now, before we understand why we need rational use, we should know that what is the problem with what is the irrational use of drugs. When do we say that we are using the drugs irrationally? I think this is something that everybody should know, and everybody, to some extent, to a large extent, is also aware. The use of too many medicines per patient, and there is polypharmacy, inappropriate use of antimicrobials, often an inadequate dosage for non-bacterial infections, overuse of injections and oral formulations would be more appropriate, and failure to prescribe in accordance with clinical guidelines, and self-medication or use of prescription-only medicines. So all these things they constitute the problem of irrational use of drugs. Now, so lack of access to medicines and inappropriate doses result in serious morbidity and mortality, particularly for childhood infections and chronic diseases. So when there is irrational use, when there is lack of access to medicines because of irrational use, so the mortality and morbidity is going to increase. So inappropriate use and overuse of medicines, they waste resources. So wastage of resources also is leading to promoting irrational use of drugs. Overuse of antimicrobials leading to increased antimicrobial resistance. And use of non-sterile injections leading to transmission of various diseases, especially hepatitis and AIDS. And another important aspect of irrational use is that it stimulates inappropriate patient demand. What does that mean? Because whenever the resources are not being utilized properly, the patient will go to the clinic, he will not get the drug, and there will be too much demand for the wrong drug, for the new drug. So the resources are used in an irrational way, leading to loss of patient's confidence in the system. So to summarize, so these are the common reasons. Again, I am repeating this because this is something which everybody should take home from this interaction. That lack of adequate information about the prescribed drugs, faulty and inadequate training of medical graduates, poor communication between the healthcare providers and patients, lack of diagnostic facilities, and also demand from the patient that assuming every ill has a pill, and defective drug supply system. So these are all these factors put together produces the reasons behind irrational use of medicines. Now, if the problem is so big and can be in some way quantitate, so I'm using the of quantitative, because when we say rational drug use, we usually say that it is a concept, but when we can actually study the problem of rational drug use, so there are some techniques like by studying the prescribing indicators, by studying the patient care indicators, and by studying the health facility indicators, we can actually quantify how much are we using the drugs rationally? Is the health system using the drugs rationally or not? So what are prescribing indicators? Nothing but you are just studying the average number of drugs per encounter. You're seeing whether there is polypharmacy, percentage of drugs prescribed with generic name, percentage of encounters with antibiotics. So you're studying the kind of prescriptions that are being written. Then there are patient care indicators. What is the average time the patient is spending in consultation with the physician, and percentage of drugs which are actually dispensed to him, percentage of drugs actually labeled, patient's knowledge about the use of drugs. After this, we come to health facility indicators. And what are health facility indicators? They are the availability of essential drugs. Does the health system has a list of essential drugs? Does it have standard treatment guidelines? Does it have formularies? So all these and availability of these essential drugs. So all these this helps in defining whether this system will be able, this health facility will be able to deliver the treatment in a more rational way. So this brings us to the discussion for today. I'm going to discuss the concept of the essential medicine for the standard treatment guidelines and the hospital formulary. And these taken together, they also define. So these are like all these essential medicines, formularies, standard treatment guidelines. They are like support pillars for rational use of drugs. Now, what are essential? As the name implies, the word essential means something which is very necessary. So, essential medicines are those that satisfy the priority healthcare needs of the population. This is as defined by the WHO. And so, here the community need has been taken into account. So the list is made with consideration of disease prevalence, efficacy, safety and comparative cost effectiveness of the medicines. And the important point here is that these medicines have to be available in adequate amounts, in appropriate dosage forms and strengths with assured quality. And the drugs which are given in the essential drug list, especially the national list of essential medicines, they are also under the price control order. That is, the prices are fixed. So they should be available in such a way that an individual or community can afford. So affordability is also a very important parameter in essential medicine. So if we have essential medicines, how is it going to help us? It will help us in giving better quality of medical care. So one can ask, how will it help us in giving better quality of medical care? Because first of all, these medicines will be affordable. As we discussed, they respond to the priority health needs of the population. So if the population is affected by that disease, so they are addressing that disease population. So all these things put together will help in better quality of medical care. Better management of medicines will be there. Cost-effective use of healthcare resources, and because expensive and unnecessary medicines will not be prescribed. If the prescription is being made from the essential drugs list, then unnecessary costly medicines will not be prescribed. So there will be, so these medicines will be cost effective. So we will save on the health resources. And this is especially important for our country because we have limited resources. And so list of essential medicines is therefore going to have a positive impact on the availability and rational use of medicines. So first country to have its essential medicines list was Tanzania in 1970. And after that came the WHO model list of essential medicines, which was published in the year 1977, which contained 186 medicines. And since then there have been numerous revisions to the WHO model list, and WHO essential medicine list is a model list, and decision about which medicines are essential remains a national responsibility. So most of the countries, they are using the WHO model list and adapting it to their own country's needs. So based on that country's disease burden, priority health concerns, affordability concerns, the model list is adapted to suit the needs for the country. In India, our first national list of essential medicines came in 1996, and at that time it had 279 medicines, 279 drugs. In 2003, again it was revised 2011, and the most recent revision in 2015. And it has 376 medicines. So, what is NLEM helpful in? NLEM is going to help us in guiding. It's a guide for the safe and effective treatment of priority disease conditions of a population, to promote the rational use of medicines, and to optimize the available health resources of a country. So these are the goals that NLEM is going to achieve. Apart from that, this can also serve as a list. The state governments can also refer to the NLEM to prepare their own state list for the essential medicines, and it can also help in procurement and supply of medicines in the public sector, and reimbursement of cost of medicines by organization to its employees. So if there is an insurance system or reimbursement facility is there, then it can help in guiding. And they can also serve as a must-know domain for the teaching and the training of healthcare professionals. So this slide is showing that what information is given in the national list of essential medicines. Just one example, that when we say that this is the list of essential medicines, what are the information that list is providing? It will provide the medicine name. Of course, there will be like under the, for instance, I have taken example of versatile salicylic acid. It is listed under non-opioid analgesic, antipyretics, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medicines. So there is a long list. I am just showing what information is given. So the medicine is acetyl salicylic acid. It is also showing the level of healthcare in which this medicine should be present, like PSC, the peripheral centers, the secondary and the tertiary level, in both dosage, form and strength. So precisely this is the information that the essential medicines are. It does not give us any information on how to use, what are the side effects, etc., or how it is to be prepared. So that all is not there. Only this is the information. And if we have whatever number of drugs, for each drug only this information will be available. So what about the selection criteria? Again, as I said earlier, that priority healthcare concern is the what is the health concern? That is the main selection criteria for the drug. So in a country like ours, which is a large geographic area and which has huge diversity in climate and food habits and culture, so lot of focus has to be given on what are the prevalent diseases in each area of our country. For example, Kala Azar, which is more prevalent in Bihar, and therefore medicines for priority healthcare conditions for different regions of the country should be considered for inclusion in NLEM. There are the affordability concerns. Can the population afford? Can the system afford? So, affordability of the medicine in a population depends on a number of factors such as the status of the healthcare infrastructure and socio-economic status of the people and health insurance. So, there may be some situations where some medicines or formulations may have advantage over other medicines or formulations in similar class, but the high cost, differentiation and unaffordability by common man may not merit their inclusion in NLEM. So, we have a nice example to illustrate this, that there are, for instance, the three iron preparations, iron dextran, iron sucrose and ferric carboxymaltose. Iron dextran, though it is the cheapest, but it also has risk of anaphylaxis. Iron sucrose is costlier but safer. And ferric carboxymaltose has the least safety concern but can deliver the maximum amount of iron, but it is expensive. So in our NLEM, iron sucrose was chosen because it is also a bit costlier but it is safer. So affordability as well as safety concern has been kept in mind. But another medication example like injectable amphotericin B, which is available as both lipid and liposomal forms. Both lipid and liposomal forms are available because they have different advantages. One is cheaper, but other is more safer. So the areas where one can afford the more expensive formulation, they can, therefore both the medications have been kept. Both lipid and liposomal as well as conventional forms have been included. So all the medicines which are listed in the NLEM, they come under the drug price control order. So the ministry, so there is a ceiling price of medicines which has been fixed for all the drugs which are there in the NLEM. Now this is very important that this document is a dynamic document. I showed you in the previous slide that so many revisions have already been done. In 2011 it was done, 2015. Now it has been decided that it should be done every 3 years. Revision in NLEM should be done every 3 years. Why revision is necessary? Because the disease profile is continuously changing. And for instance, we know that at the time of independence, the communicable disease, infectious diseases were more common, and now the non-communicable disease epidemic is taking place. So, with time, the disease conditions are changing, and therefore the list needs to be continuously revised. There is also the issue of resistance, especially when antimicrobials are used. Antimicrobial drug resistance is very important. So, one has to see whether the drugs which are included, the antibiotics which are included, they are keeping with time. And of course, with time, there is research and development of drugs. Newer drugs are being developed, and therefore, one example here I've written is that ergot alkaloids were used commonly earlier for migraine, but once sumatriptan was introduced, so sumatriptan replaced ergot in the management of migraine. So, new research and new development has to be taken into account when revising the list. Having an essential drug list is very important, but just by having the essential drug list, we cannot totally ensure that we will have, the practitioners will be adopting rational use of medicine. So what is the other thing that can be done? So other step is having a formulary. So what is formulary? At its most basic level, a formulary is a list of medicines. And it's again not a new concept, because there in the earlier times also. But in those times, the formulary contained a collection of formulas for the compounding and testing of medication. And it was more like a pharmacopoeia which we know today. But with time, the characteristics of formulary have changed. So today, the main function of prescription formulary is to specify particular medications that are approved to be prescribed at a particular hospital, in a particular health system, or under a particular health insurance policy. And the development of prescription formularies is based on evaluations of efficacy, safety, and cost effectiveness of the drug. So depending upon the individual formulary, it may also contain additional information such as side effects, contraindication, and doses. So it is carrying a wide range of information on the doses which will help the practitioner. So we have a national formulary in India. So national formulary contains list of medicines that are approved for prescription throughout the country. So it includes key information on composition, description, selection, prescribing, dispensing, and administration of medicines. Sorry, the images for the old formulary, but I just wanted to show the picture of national formulary. We have the 2015 formulary available with us now, and it is published by the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission. The Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission has been appointed by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to revise and update formulary periodically. This is the example of the information that we would have that the formulary contains. So for instance, we have a drug ibuprofen. It is going to list some special properties about ibuprofen, like whether it is safe to be used in pregnancy, in which pregnancy category the drug will be coming in, which schedule the drug will be coming in, what are the indications of the drug, in which conditions it can be given, availability, what are the formulations available like tablets, doses of the tablets as capsules, as suspension, in what is the dose, oral dose for adults, for children, for intravenous, what dose should be given, for special like arthritis, what dose should be given. So also contraindications to the use of the drug, the precautions, the adverse effects, and how to store the drug. So the formulary is containing such a large information on drug as compared to the essential drug list. So don't you think that this is going to help the prescriber more, because he has a ready reference of how to use the drug. So formulary is a manual containing clinically oriented summaries of pharmacological information about selected drugs. It may also include administrative and regulatory information pertaining to the prescribing and dispensing of drugs, like we showed you in the previous slide. And the national formulary that we have is concentrating on the available and affordable medicines that are relevant to the treatment of diseases in a particular country. So this is the national level. But we can have formularies, we can come down, we can have formularies for the small health facility level, or we can have formularies for the hospital. So we can have formularies created for different levels of healthcare, different sectors, and for hospitals. So little bit, the NFL was first published in 1960. So the first NFL National Formulary of India was published in 1960. Then revision came in 66, 1979, and in the past 3 decades, there has been vast expansion in the range of new drugs and their formulation. And so Ministry of Health and Family Welfare was earlier bringing out the formulary. But after that, this responsibility was given to the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, as I mentioned. And the national formulary has been adopted from the WHO model formulary, and it is thoroughly updated for its content. like WHO has an essential drug list, model list, it also has a WHO model formulary. So our formulary has been adapted from the WHO model formulary. Very importantly, it is not a regulatory document, but a reference document for health professionals. So if whatever is written is not the law, because uh, physicians are also supposed to use their experience and judgment. So one cannot say that it is written like this in the formulary. It is just a reference document. The treatment regimens in respect of diseases and ailments included in this document may change from time to time, and therefore physicians should adapt to the changed regimens. So the revision of formulary from time to time is very important. So National formulary as it is today contains 33 chapters of therapeutic categories, 521 monographs, 33 fixed dose combinations, 20 immunologicals, 12 vitamins. There is a long list of drugs and it also has appendices on special appendices detailing about adverse drug reaction, their causality assessment, use in pregnancy, allergic reactions, and some information on basics of medical emergencies, and a special chapter on drugs for oral health, just to show that it has widened its perspective. So this we also discussed that storage conditions of the drugs is also being mentioned in the formulary, how to store the drugs. And also it has some information on management of rare diseases. Now, when we microsize and we look at what our hospital needs, and we develop a formulary according to the needs of our own hospital, so we have what we call the hospital formulary. So with the increased prevalence and incidence of disease, and with increased number and diversity of medicines worldwide, every hospital should maintain a formulary of its own so as to reduce the variations in the level of treatment provided to the patient. So we can have one doctor who is prescribing more drugs, another doctor who is prescribing less drugs, maybe one is practicing polypharmacy. So this hospital formulary to some extent can standardize the treatment, and because he will know that the prescriber will know that I have to prescribe drugs from this list of drugs which are given in the hospital formulary. So formulary is continually revised compilation of pharmaceuticals and some important ancillary information that reflects the current clinical judgment of medical staff. What is the main reason for developing hospital formulary? To set standards for best practice, promoting high quality evidence-based prescribing, thus minimizing the variation in the level of treatment provided to the patient. A formulary can also be used as a tool to rationalize the range of medicines used in standard practice. It is important that it should be complete, concise, updated and easy to use. So these properties of formularies are very important. So who are the members? If a hospital formulary has to be prepared, a core group has to be brought together. So this core group should include representative clinicians from each major specialty like surgery, obstetrics, gynecology, medicine, pediatrics and so on. A clinical pharmacologist, a nurse, a pharmacist, an administrator, somebody from the finance side, because he has to decide on which more expensive medicines will be included or not, clinical microbiologist and member from the hospital records department. So all these people get together and they study what is the patient load in the hospital, what is the budget, and what is the antibiotic spectrum, resistance spectrum like, and they can sit together and discuss and compile the formulary. So we have different types of formularies, like you can have an open formulary, closed or restricted formulary, or an incentive-based formulary. So what is an open formulary? It is merely a guide. A physician may prescribe any drug, but is encouraged to use the formulary list in prescribing decisions. So it's not just that the drugs listed in the formulary are to be used for prescription. He can use other drugs also. In a closed or restricted formulary, it lists the drugs that will be reimbursed by the healthcare provider. So non-formulary drugs will be reimbursed only if they are authorized by prescription. So if we have a system of reimbursement which is in the given hospital, so the drugs which are listed in the formulary, only those will be reimbursed. Then there is another incentive-based formulary which represents a hybrid between the open and the closed formularies, and patients pay a higher price for non-formulary drugs. So again, these are different types. So of course, designing hospital formulary is not easy, but it does deliver a lot of benefits. So what are the main benefit is cost containment and enhanced equity in access to essential medicines. This is the most important benefit from the hospital formulary. Again, this will help in rational use of drugs. So procuring fewer items in larger quantities results in more competition and economies of scale with regard to quality assurance, procurement, storage and distribution. And such economies can lead to improved drug availability at lower cost, so benefiting those who are in most need. So again, we will save on money. Cost containment will be there, because the organization will know which drugs are to be procured for the hospital. Improved quality of care. Patients will be treated with fewer but more cost-effective medicines. So there will be improved quality of care, for which information can be better provided and prescribers can be better trained. If I am prescribing a drug again and again from a given list of drugs, I will become more proficient in prescribing that drug. I will become more acquainted with the adverse drug reactions, the contraindications, etc. So patient is also benefiting largely. So patients will be treated with fewer but more cost-effective medicine, for which information can be better provided and prescribers better trained. And prescribers gain more experience with fewer drugs and recognize drug interactions and adverse drug reactions better. So in a nutshell, all these will help in improving quality of care. And now when we design the formulary, what is the criteria in medicine selection? When the team sits and the team decides these are the drugs that I would like to include in the formulary, what are the criteria? Especially for the national formulary, only those medicines should be selected for which sound and adequate data on efficacy and safety are available from clinical studies. So evidence has to be there that these drugs are efficacious and safe. Each selected medicine must be available in a form in which adequate quality, including bioavailability, can be assured, and its stability under the anticipated conditions of storage and use must be established. So the drug that is chosen, if I am in the periphery, I should know that if I choose this drug, I will be able to store it properly. When two or more medicines appear to be similar in the above respect, the choice between them should be made on the basis of careful evaluation of their efficacy, safety, quality, price and availability. So these are the guiding principles only for drug selection. And when comparing the cost between medicines, if one medicine is appearing cheap, other is appearing more expensive, then what is the criteria? The criteria is we should not just look at the unit cost of the medicine. We should consider the cost of the entire treatment. So if it's a 5-day antibiotic course, we should calculate what is the cost for the 5-day antibiotic course for both the drugs, drug A and drug B, and then compare the cost. So essential medicines, formulary, and now standard treatment guidelines. So what are standard treatment guidelines? They are also very important in helping us to deliver the drugs rationally. And standard treatment guidelines or STGs, there have other names also like standard treatment schedules, standard treatment protocols, therapeutic guidelines. So other names are also there. They have also existed since long. If we see historical records, the traditional healers, they also developed their standard set of cures and passed them from generation to generation by word of mouth or in writing. So this actually is standard treatment guidelines is just like a protocol that this has to be done. If this is the ailment, these are the steps to be taken. So STDs have been formulated to minimize the erroneous use and thereby to promote the rational use of essential medicines. The experience has shown that even when pharmaceutical supply is based on an approved formulary or essential medicines list, ample opportunity exists for ineffective, unsafe or wasteful prescribing. This is very important to understand. We have given the physician the devised an essential drug list, given it to the physician. We have made a formulary, given it to the physician. Physician knows that these are the cheap, affordable, efficacious, safe drugs. These are the contraindication uses of the drugs. But still, those drugs will not be used rationally, even though he has the essential drug list and formulary. Why? Because there may be more than one treatment modality available for many medical conditions. If I have to treat hypertension, there are 10 drugs, 20 drugs. And maybe more than 10 are there in the formulary also, in the drug monograph. Maybe more than that are there in the essential drug list. So which one and how to treat, how to choose, or if there is a condition for which non-pharmacological treatment is also important as well as pharmacological treatment, but the physician straight away jumps to the pharmacological treatment. Many practitioners will not remember the best method of treatment, so which leads to confusion and many cases incorrect choice of treatment. So formulary management will have only limited impact if medicines are used incorrectly. The correct use of medicine, some protocol has to be there for using the medicine. So standard treatment guidelines list the preferred pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical treatments for common health problems experienced by people in a specific health system. As such, they represent one approach to promoting therapeutically effective and economically efficient prescribing. So, it has a lot of advantages for all the stakeholders, for the patient, for the prescriber, for the health managers. So, what are the advantages for the patient? So, consistency among prescribers will reduce confusion and will increase compliance. Most effective treatments will be prescribed. There will be improved access to drugs if drugs are prescribed only when needed. So, if I rationalize that I will start antihypertensive medication only when the non-pharmacological measures or lifestyle changes have failed for the patient, or for or in case of diabetes or some other conditions, common cold, I will not straight away prescribe. So it will help in improved access to drugs if drugs are prescribed only when needed, because drugs are also a resource. Minimize adverse drug reactions and other drug-related complications. So when drugs are prescribed rationally, this is the end result. We will have less adverse drug reactions and there will be safer use of drugs. What about the providers? It will gives expert consensus on most effective economical treatment for a specific setting. So how standard treatment guidelines? Sorry. Standard treatment guidelines are actually prepared by a group of experts. So, if we have a document of with us, we know that most of the experts have opined to treat this particular condition in this way. The providers can concentrate on correct diagnosis. The provide a standard to access quality of care, provide a simple basis for monitoring and supervision, and minimize liabilities of the healthcare provider. For the supply management staff, this is also very important. The performance of standard for drug supply, there should be sufficient quantities of drug available for the most commonly treated problems at the different levels of health system. It facilitates pre-packaging of course of therapy. Um, and drug demand becomes more predictable, so forecasting becomes more reliable, and it enables effective maintenance of inventory. For the health policy makers, it provides a method to control costs by using drug funds more efficiently, and it serves as a basis to assess and compare quality of care. And development and implementation of a single set of standard treatments can be a vehicle for integrating special programs at the primary healthcare facilities, example diarrhea disease control, tuberculosis control, malaria control. So we have national guidelines available for all these programs. So the diseases which are coming under the national health programs, there is a set of guidelines. So even the prescriber at the lowest level of healthcare will know that if a person is coming with this condition, this is what has to be done, and the health policy makers will also come to know that this is the level of the quantity of medicines and facilities that has to be made available. So enable to achieve the regulatory control over illicit, spurious and counterfeit drugs at all levels. And this is again a very important advantage associated with having a standard treatment guidelines, and minimize legal issues over procurement, marketing of life-saving drugs. So there will be standard treatments will focus on thinking on critical aspects of therapeutic processes, like I mentioned that the drugs, they know that these are the drugs that will be given in this condition, so more emphasis can be given to identification of signs and symptoms on the correct diagnosis, and effective patient counseling on proper use of drugs or non-drug treatments that will truly benefit the patient. Disadvantages are also there. Suppose if the standard treatment guidelines are inaccurate or incomplete, then it will provide wrong information for providers. Therefore, it can do more harm. So again, emphasizing that it has to be regularly revised. And guidelines may not be based on the most reliable information, although when it is prepared by a group of experts, but there can be some loopholes, errors. Updating guidelines is difficult and time consuming and must be done on a regular schedule, or they will become obsolete very quickly, because medicine is a fast evolving field. So regular revisions are very necessary. If that is not taken care of, then these guidelines will become obsolete. Like I mentioned, if Arbot compounds are given for migraine, and now sumatriptan is given for migraine. So revision is very important. So guidelines have been referred to as cookbook medicines, and they provide information to treat the population but not necessarily the individual patient. So this is another very important criticism of standard treatment guidelines. That as an individual I may need something else, and I may not conform to what is given in the standard treatment guidelines. And the guidelines provide a false sense of security, that is, many providers will limit their evaluation of a particular patient as soon as it fits into a particular standard treatment. So the physician will not totally evaluate the patient, thinking that he has to be given treatment based on the standard treatment guidelines. But the key important factors again are first the simplicity. It will make the life very simple, and because for each health problem, the number of health problems listed in the STPs are limited, And for each health problem, a few key clinical diagnostic criteria are listed. And finally, drugs and dosing information is clear and concise. So this is the information that is given in the standard treatment guideline. There is credibility because the treatments are developed for the patients by most eminent physicians. The standard treatment guidelines will literally give you the name of the physicians who were involved in preparing. So they are the physicians are usually more very reputed physicians who develop these guidelines. And revisions are based on actual experience and same standards for all levels. The first choice of treatment of a patient depends on the patient's diagnosis and condition. The reference criteria may differ. And doctors and other healthcare providers can use the same treatment, standard treatment. Whether a patient attends a primary level health system or secondary level health system or a tertiary level health system. Like management of diarrhea will be same for the primary healthcare, at the secondary healthcare or even the tertiary. So, the drug supply based on standards. So the standard treatment guidelines coordinate with the supply of drugs. Again, if the drug is listed in the, for instance, for the tuberculosis control, we have drugs listed in the guidelines. So the availability of those drugs will always be assured. Pre-service training. The doctor at the initial level, the junior doctor can be given the standard treatment manuals and can be trained based on the standard treatment guidelines. Regular updates, the change or alteration in the therapeutic preferences are incorporated and updated, and the standard should be revised to reflect current recommendations. And this is just to show snapshot on the screen to show that we have so many like standard treatment guidelines under the national health programs, like for antimicrobial resistance, for infectious diseases, for tuberculosis, for management of mental disorders, ear conditions. There's a long list. So in the end, I'll again like to emphasize that rational use of drugs is a multi-pronged approach. We learned in the previous lecture that teaching is very important. In this lecture, we learned that the generating certain facilities like having an essential drug list, having a formulary, having standard treatment guidelines, they are also very important. So it's giving good therapy to the patient is actually an amalgamation of lot of things in the end. So lot of things go into make the masala tea or the very good mix of rational therapy for the patient. Thank you.
One question.
Yeah.
If instead of developing hospital formulary, making member, it is just my view, what is your view? They can make own personal formulary in department wise, and then can be possible to amalgam them.
No,
Department wise they can develop personal formulary, like gynae, they can develop personal formulary by sitting to department wise develop personal formulary. Afterwards they can.
So what you're trying to say is that for that particular department, they can make a list of formulary that what are the common drugs that they are using, and therefore what are the list of dosage, uses, contraindications, etc.
They are more satisfaction. Because
so yes, that would be a departmental effort.
If you like hospital therapeutic committee forced to use them, they are not satisfied many of the times.
So it is something like we have the equipment in the lab and we are making that this is the guideline for the use of the equipment. Yes, you can do it, but then it cannot be. It's for the department only.
No, not it. Afterwards you can.
Now regarding what you was talking about the preparation of the common medicine for particular disease department wise, no? Yes, this can be done, and this can be only possible if all the department, particular medicine, surgery, gynae, they put together, they sit together and they define what is the treatment for pharyngitis, what is the treatment for tonsillitis, what is the treatment for simple malarial fever, so they can put. But altogether should be discussed in
Afterwards,
college
they
council
can
or drug purchase
incorporate it.
committee, hospital formulary, that will be in the form of called as standard treatment guidelines, which the KEM has formed. And I think there is one book written by Dr. Ranjit Raj Chaudhary, standard treatment guidelines. So it should be approved that. So they should write that only paracetamol for this one, or one antibiotic for tonsillitis or pharyngitis. So it will not change. So that we are which are following in the meetings, standard treatment there.
Actually, it has to, what is the objective? I mean, if it is for the hospital, there are different objectives. For the physician, it may be a different objective. So, the hospital wants to ensure that the drug has to be reimbursed or the same drug should be given. There should be no disparity that some patients are being given expensive drugs, some are being given less expensive, cheap drugs.
So that's why madam, what in our hospital or most of the hospital, that we have the list of the commonly used which we are purchasing in the medical college.
So it helps in the purchase of the drug.
Purchase of the drug and that we are prescribing of the drug.
Yes.
And the physician or the treating the people should write the drug only from that for which are the drug available in our hospital.
So I am saying it is better
It is
to
not
from the
It is not possible in most of the hospital, particularly where there is a super specialty. They write their P drug or they write their branded name, and the same drug is available with the generic name.
So I
And
am
allow
saying
that
sir, it is
every
better
drug
to
is-
go from the department.
Huh?
Better is you go from the department.
Yes, you can prepare your treatment guidelines
But then
and
it
get
has
it
to be
approved.
approved, it
You have
has
to
to
be
be
approved.
approved by the committee.
Approved by the committee.
And formation of the committee is
Ultimately,
important.
okay, you can make your program.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So now we'll be taking a short tea break for 20 minutes since we are exceeding our time. And we invite all of you to kindly join us to the college lawn for